They told me to shut up and don't say a word. But today silence ends. The woman standing before the Westmont University Board of Trustees was not supposed to be there. She was supposed to be invisible, pushing her cleaning cart through empty hallways at 3 in the morning, wiping down the very mahogany table where administrators now sat frozen in shock. Donna Carter held a thick manila folder above her head, her hand steady despite the trembling that had kept her awake for 72 hours straight. Inside that folder were bank statements, email printouts, photographs taken with a phone so old it could barely focus, and a timeline that stretched back 15 years. 15 years of watching, documenting, and waiting for the right moment to speak. The chandelier above cast harsh shadows across her face, deepening the lines that night shifts and worry had carved into her skin. Please support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Donna Carter had been cleaning floors at Westmont University for 22 years, ever since the week after her husband died and left her with a 3-year-old son and $17 in their checking account. She was 48 now, and her knees ached from 2 decades of kneeling on tile. Her shoulders burned from reaching into corners that daylight never touched. And her hands were permanently rough from industrial chemicals that promised to sanitize everything they touched. She worked the graveyard shift, 10 at night until 6 in the morning, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when they needed extra coverage for alumni events or board meetings. The university paid her $14 an hour, which was exactly $2 more than she had made when she started, and it was never quite enough. Her son Marcus was 18 now, brilliant and kind, with his father's gentle eyes and her stubborn determination. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the part of town where the bus routes ended and the grocery stores charged more for less. Donna had spent 18 years making sure Marcus never went to bed hungry, never missed a school field trip because she could not afford the fee, never felt the weight of their poverty crush his dreams the way it sometimes crushed hers in the dark hours before dawn. She had worked double shifts to pay for his SAT prep books, had studied with him at the kitchen table after her overnight shifts, had believed with every fiber of her being that education was the ladder out of the hole they had been born into. Marcus was going to college. Marcus was going to have a different life. That was the promise Donna had made to herself and to the memory of the man she had loved and lost. Dr. Jonathan Whitmore had been the vice president of admissions and financial aid at Westmont University for 12 years. And in that time he had perfected the art of looking generous while being greedy, of sounding compassionate while being cruel. He was 52 years old, tall and silver-haired, with the kind of symmetrical features and confident bearing that made people trust him instinctively. His office on the 3rd floor of the administration building had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the quad, leather furniture that cost more than Donna made in 6 months, and a mahogany desk that she polished every Tuesday night. He wore suits that were tailored in the city, drove a car that purred instead of rattled, and lived in a house with a circular driveway and a fountain that ran year-round. Westmont parents loved him because he spoke their language, understood their concerns, and always found a way to make their children feel special. What those parents did not know, what almost nobody knew, was that Dr. Whitmore had been running a systematic scheme for the past decade, selling admission slots and scholarship money to the highest bidder, funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars through shell accounts and offshore banks. He used his position to ensure that certain students, usually wealthy and white, received opportunities that should have gone to others. He justified it to himself in the rare moments when his conscience whispered objections. The university needed donors, families needed certainty, and he needed to maintain the lifestyle that his position deserved. Everyone won, he told himself. Everyone except the students who actually earned their place and never got the chance to prove it. 15 years ago, when Donna's grief was still raw and her future seemed impossible, Dr. Whitmore had been newly hired and full of ambitious promises. He had found her crying in a stairwell one night after a parent had yelled at her for not cleaning a bathroom quickly enough, and he had sat down beside her, had asked her what was wrong, had listened as she poured out her fear that she would never be able to give her son the life he deserved. Dr. Whitmore had taken her hand, had looked her in the eyes, and had said something that Donna would remember for the rest of her life. He told her that Westmont took care of its own, that when the time came and Marcus was ready for college, he would personally make sure the boy received every consideration. He told her that loyalty and hard work mattered more than money at an institution like this. Donna had believed him. She had believed him so completely that it had changed everything. She worked harder, stayed later, never complained when they asked her to cover extra shifts or clean up after events that left the buildings trashed. She had seen things over the years, things that made her uncomfortable. Late-night meetings in Dr. Whitmore's office with parents who arrived in expensive cars and left looking satisfied. Envelopes that changed hands in hallways when they thought no one was watching. Conversations that stopped abruptly when she pushed her cart past open doors. But Donna had told herself that she must be misunderstanding, that a man who had been so kind to her would never be dishonest, that her job was to clean and not to question. She had been Dr. Whitmore's unwitting accomplice, her silence purchased with a promise, her trust weaponized against her own interests. Marcus Carter had graduated third in his class at Roosevelt High School with a grade point average that had required sacrifice and brilliance in equal measure. He had scored in the 98th percentile on the SAT, which he had taken twice to make sure the first score was not a fluke. He had spent his summers volunteering at the community center, tutoring younger kids in math and reading, organizing donation drives for families even poorer than his own. His college essay, which Donna had read so many times she could recite passages from memory, was about growing up watching his mother leave for work when other kids' mothers were tucking them into bed, about understanding that dignity was not measured in dollars. He wanted to become a lawyer who fought for people who had no one else to fight for them. He had applied to 7 schools, but Westmont was the dream. Westmont had a full scholarship program for students from underrepresented backgrounds, students who showed exceptional academic achievement despite economic hardship. Marcus was exactly who that program had been designed for. Donna had helped him with his application on her nights off, had driven him to campus for his interview, had watched him walk through the Gothic archways and brick pathways with an expression of longing that made her chest hurt. She had allowed herself to hope, to imagine him wearing the school colors, to picture herself attending his graduation in 4 years. She had even mentioned it to Dr. Whitmore one night when she was cleaning his office and he was working late, and he had smiled warmly and told her not to worry, told her that everything would work out the way it should. Donna had gone home that night feeling lighter than she had in months, certain that the promise from 15 years ago was finally coming true. Donna finished vacuuming the hallway outside Dr. Whitmore's office and began emptying the recycling bins, a task that had become unexpectedly informative over the years. People threw away things they should not, forgot that someone had to collect the trash, that the invisible woman with the cart might have eyes and a memory. She had found things in these bins, things that troubled her even as she tried to tell herself they were none of her business. Brochures from private banks in the Cayman Islands. Printouts of student transcripts with handwritten notes in the margins about donation potential. A torn envelope, once that had contained a check for $50,000 made out to a foundation Donna had never heard of. She had learned to notice patterns, to remember dates, to connect information that seemed random, but was not. She had learned that Dr. Whitmore met with certain families always on Thursday evenings, always after the administrative staff had gone home, always with his office door closed and his voice low. She had learned which students received acceptances that surprised even the admissions counselors who worked under Dr. Whitmore's supervision. Students whose applications were mediocre, but whose parents were generous. She had learned to recognize the difference between the families who belonged at Westmont and the families who bought their way in. And she had learned to stay quiet, because speaking up required a courage she did not have and a security she could not risk. Until the day the letter arrived from Marcus, and staying quiet was no longer an option she could live with. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late March, thin and impersonal in its official envelope with the Westmont University seal embossed in the corner. Marcus had been checking the mailbox every day for 3 weeks, and when he finally held that envelope in his hands, Donna watched his face transform from hope to understanding to devastation in the space of a single breath. He did not open it right away. He stood in their small living room with the afternoon light slanting through the window that overlooked the parking lot, and he turned the envelope over and over as though he could change what was inside through sheer force of will. When he finally tore it open, his hands were shaking. The letter was brief, almost cruelly so, thanking him for his application and informing him that the admissions committee had made the difficult decision not to offer him a place in the incoming class. There was a line about the exceptional quality of the applicant pool, another about how this decision did not reflect his worth as a student or person, and a final sentence wishing him success in his future endeavors. The scholarship he had applied for, the one specifically designed for students from underrepresented backgrounds who demonstrated academic excellence despite economic hardship, was not mentioned. There was no explanation, no detail, nothing that acknowledged the years of sacrifice and work that had led to this moment. Marcus read the letter twice, then handed it to his mother without saying a word. Donna read it 3 times, and with each reading her chest grew tighter and her hands grew colder until she thought she might be sick. Insufficient qualifications. Her son, who had never received anything lower than a minus in his entire academic career, who had scored higher on the SAT than 98% of students nationwide, who had spent his summers helping other people's children learn to read, was insufficiently qualified. Donna called in sick to work that night for the first time in 8 years, and she sat with Marcus in the living room while he tried to process what had happened and what it meant for his future. He had been accepted to 2 state schools, but without scholarships the tuition was impossible, and the community college option felt like watching his dreams shrink to fit the space that poverty allowed. Marcus did not cry, but Donna almost wished he would. Instead, he sat very still, his face closed and distant, and told her it was fine, that he would figure something out, that she should not worry. But Donna knew her son, knew the way disappointment looked on his face, knew the exact moment when hope died and resignation took its place. She thought about Dr. Whitmore's promise from 15 years ago, thought about all the times she had seen him with wealthy parents in hallways and offices, thought about the way he had smiled at her just weeks ago and told her not to worry. Something hard and angry began to crystallize in her chest, something that felt like certainty. The next morning, while Marcus was at his shift at the grocery store, Donna put on her best dress, the one she wore to church on Easter, and took the bus to campus in the middle of the day for the first time in 22 years. She was going to ask Dr. Whitmore to explain how her brilliant son was insufficiently qualified. She was going to remind him of his promise. She was going to give him a chance to make this right. The administrative building looked different in daylight, softer and less imposing than it did in the empty hours after midnight when Donna pushed her cart through its corridors. Students walked past her without seeing her, their backpacks and laughter and casual confidence a reminder of everything Marcus should have had. Donna took the stairs to the 3rd floor, her heart pounding not from exertion but from a fear she could not quite name. Dr. Whitmore's secretary, a young woman with perfect makeup and a nameplate that read Janitor, looked up from her computer with an expression of polite confusion when Donna approached the desk. Donna explained that she needed to speak with Dr. Whitmore about a student admission decision, and Jennifer's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like pity. She asked if Donna had an appointment, and when Donna said she did not, Jennifer explained that Dr. Moore's schedule was extremely full and that matters related to admission decisions were typically not discussed with individuals outside the immediate family. Donna felt her face grow hot, felt the familiar shame of being dismissed, but she forced herself to stay calm. She explained that she worked at the university, that Dr. Whitmore knew her, that it would only take a few minutes. Jennifer looked uncertain, glanced at the closed door of the inner office, and finally picked up her phone. There was a brief, quiet conversation that Donna could not hear, and then Jennifer hung up and told Donna that Dr. Whitmore could spare 5 minutes if she would please wait. Donna sat in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, her hands folded in her lap, and tried to prepare herself for a conversation she had been rehearsing in her mind for 2 days. Dr. Whitmore's office was exactly as Donna remembered from her countless nights of cleaning it, but sitting in one of the chairs across from his desk as a petitioner, rather than moving invisibly around the furniture, changed everything. He did not stand when she entered, did not offer the warm smile or kind words she remembered from 15 years ago. Instead, he looked at her with an expression of mild annoyance, glancing at his watch before gesturing to the chair. He asked what he could do for her, and Donna explained about Marcus, about the rejection letter, about the scholarship that seemed designed for exactly the kind of student her son was. She spoke carefully, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to sound reasonable rather than desperate. Dr. Whitmore listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin, and when she finished he was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and said that admission decisions were based on a holistic review of many factors, that academic achievement was only one component, that students from Westmont's traditional feeder schools had certain advantages in terms of preparation and cultural fit. He said the words cultural fit with particular emphasis, and Donna felt something inside her recoil. She reminded him, gently, that Marcus had perfect grades, exceptional test scores, meaningful extracurricular involvement. Dr. Whitmore's expression hardened slightly. He said that test scores did not always reflect true intellectual capacity, that students from certain backgrounds often received inflated grades, that the admissions committee had to consider whether an applicant would thrive in Westmont's rigorous environment. Each word was a small knife, precise and deliberate. Donna felt her throat tighten, but she pushed forward, reminding Dr. Whitmore of their conversation 15 years ago, of his promise to help when the time came. And Dr. Whitmore's face changed then, and for a moment Donna saw something that looked almost like contempt cross his features. He told her that he had said he would help, not that he could guarantee anything, that circumstances changed over 15 years, that promising to consider an application was not the same as promising acceptance. His voice took on a patronizing tone, the kind of tone someone uses when explaining something to a person they believe is not quite capable of understanding. He told Donna that she had to be realistic about Marcus's prospects, that Westmont was an elite institution with standards that could not be compromised. He told her that there were other schools, perfectly good schools, that would be more appropriate for someone with her son's background. Then he said something that Donna would never forget, something that made her understand with perfect clarity exactly who Dr. Whitmore was and what he thought of her. He told her that she was a cleaner, that she had done good work for the university over the years, but that she needed to understand her place and her son's place, that not everyone was meant for institutions like Westmont, that she should be grateful for the opportunities she did have rather than demanding things that were beyond her reach. The word demanding hit Donna like a slap. She had asked politely and humbly for an explanation and for help. She had believed in a promise made 15 years ago when grief had made her vulnerable. And now she was being told to know her place, to be grateful, to understand that her son's brilliance did not matter because he came from the wrong background, the wrong neighborhood, the wrong side of the invisible lines that separated people like Dr. Whitmore from people like her. Donna stood up slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. She asked Dr. Whitmore if he would at least review Marcus's application again, if there was an appeals process, if there was anything that could be reconsidered. Dr. Whitmore sighed, the sigh of someone whose patience is wearing thin. He told her that appeals were rarely successful, that the decision had been made by the full committee, but that if she insisted, he would see what he could do. He said it in a way that made it clear he would do nothing. Then he stood, indicating that the meeting was over, and walked to his door, opening it in a gesture that was both polite and dismissive. As Donna walked past him, he placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that might have looked friendly to anyone watching but felt like ownership. He told her quietly that if she wanted him to even consider looking at Marcus's file again, she would need to show that she understood how things worked, that loyalty mattered, that cooperation was important. He suggested she might pick up some extra shifts, particularly for the upcoming alumni weekend and donor events, that demonstrating commitment to the university might reflect well on her family. Donna understood what he was asking. He wanted her silence, her compliance, her labor, and he was offering nothing concrete in return. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left his office with the taste of humiliation bitter in her mouth. She rode the bus home with tears streaming silently down her face, invisible to the other passengers, and when she arrived at her apartment, she sat on the couch for a long time, staring at nothing. Then she went to her closet, pulled out an old cardboard box from the top shelf, and took out the notebooks where she had once kept her college notes from 25 years ago. Over the next 3 weeks, Donna became a different kind of invisible. She arrived at work early and stayed late, accepting every extra shift Dr. Whitmore's office requested, cleaning up after donor dinners and alumni receptions where wealthy people ate expensive food and congratulated themselves on their generosity. But while she cleaned, she also watched and listened and documented. She had her phone, old and outdated but functional, and she began taking photographs of things that had always troubled her but that she had told herself were not her business. She photographed the scholarship award list posted on the bulletin board in the admissions office, noting that among the 15 students who received the full diversity scholarship, 12 had last names she recognized from buildings on campus. She photographed a memo left on a desk about admissions strategies that mentioned maintaining institutional character and traditional demographics. She found files in recycling bins, documents that people assumed were destroyed once they were thrown away, and she smoothed them out and photographed them in the bathroom during her break. Email printouts between Dr. Whitmore and parents, casual in tone but explicit in content, discussing contribution expectations and admission assurances. A spreadsheet that tracked donor family applications separately from regular applications, with notes in the margins about development priority. Bank statements from an education consulting company that Donna had never heard of but that seemed to have Dr. Whitmore listed as a managing director, statements showing deposits that corresponded with the enrollment of specific students. Donna did not fully understand everything she was finding, but she understood enough to know it was wrong, understood that there was a system operating in the shadows that existed to ensure that wealth perpetuated itself, while people like Marcus were told they were insufficiently qualified. Donna had learned about whistleblower protections in one of her criminal justice classes back when she had been 23 years old and full of hope about making the world more fair. She had learned about the federal fraud statutes, about mail fraud and wire fraud, about the laws that protected people who reported corruption, even when those people were low-level employees with no power. She had kept those notebooks, had sometimes paged through them late at night when she could not sleep, remembering the person she had been before circumstances had forced her to become someone smaller. Now she pulled out those notebooks and read them again, cross-referencing what she had learned decades ago with information she found online at the public library during her days off. She learned about the FBI's whistleblower program, about how to report education fraud, about what kind of evidence was considered credible. She learned that photographs were good, but that original documents were better, that patterns of behavior mattered more than single incidents, that financial records were the most powerful evidence of all. And slowly, methodically, with the same careful attention to detail she brought to her cleaning work, Donna built a case. She created a timeline, matching dates of parent meetings she had witnessed with dates of student acceptances and scholarship awards. She organized photographs by category, labeled them with dates and locations. She wrote down everything she remembered from 15 years of working in that building, every conversation she had overheard, every late-night meeting, every envelope that changed hands. She kept it all in a folder hidden in her closet, and she told no one, not even Marcus, what she was doing. One night in late April, Donna was cleaning the administrative office suite when she heard voices coming from Dr. Whitmore's office. It was past 11, and she had thought the building was empty except for her. She moved quietly down the hall, her cart wheels silent on the carpeted floor, and stopped just outside his partially open door. Dr. Whitmore was inside with two people Donna recognized as the parents of a student who had just been admitted with a full academic scholarship, despite having been suspended from his previous school for academic dishonesty. The conversation was casual, almost jovial, and Donna heard the father laugh about how Brandon, Dr. Whitmore's own son, and their son James would be roommates next year, about how the $150,000 contribution to the new science building had been a worthwhile investment. Dr. Whitmore's voice was warm, congratulatory, telling them that James's application had been very strong, that the admissions committee had been particularly impressed, that they should feel proud. No mention of the suspension, no acknowledgement of the money, just the smooth performance of meritocracy. Donna stood very still in the hallway, her heart pounding, and she pulled out her phone with hands that shook. She started a voice recording, capturing the last few minutes of the conversation, including the moment when the mother asked whether there would be any issues with James's previous academic problems, and Dr. Whitmore assured her that certain records could be omitted from transcripts if properly handled. It was the first time Donna had recorded actual voices, and when she stopped the recording, her hand was shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. That recording changed something in Donna, solidified her resolve in a way that all the documents and photographs had not quite managed. She realized that Dr. Whitmore was not just corrupt, he was shameless, confident in his impunity, certain that he would never be caught, because people like Donna were invisible and people like him were untouchable. The next morning, Donna went to the library and spent 3 hours researching FBI field offices, federal jurisdiction, and the process for reporting fraud. She made copies of every photograph and document she had collected, burned them onto a USB drive that cost her almost an hour's wages, and wrote a detailed cover letter explaining what she had witnessed and what she had documented. She included the timeline, the financial records, the photographs, and the audio recording. She included her name and contact information, which the website said would make her report more credible, but which also meant she could not hide behind anonymity. She mailed the package to the FBI field office in the city with hands that trembled. Then she went home, sat with Marcus while he studied for his community college entrance exams, and said nothing about what she had done. She did not know if the FBI would take her seriously, did not know if her evidence was enough, did not know if she had just destroyed her life for nothing. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe fully, like she had done something that mattered. 2 weeks later, a federal agent called her cell phone, asked if she would be willing to meet to discuss her report in detail. Donna said yes and scheduled the meeting for her day off. The investigation had begun. The FBI special agent who called Donna back after reviewing her initial package was a woman named Sarah Chen, and her voice on the phone was professional but warm. They met at a coffee shop 40 minutes from campus, far enough that Donna would not run into anyone she knew, and Agent Chen arrived in civilian clothes with a leather folder, an expression that Donna could not quite read. They sat in a corner booth, and Agent Chen began by thanking Donna for coming forward, explaining that education fraud cases were notoriously difficult to prosecute because the systems were designed to be opaque and the people running them were skilled at covering their tracks. Then she opened her folder and showed Donna copies of the materials Donna had sent and asked her to walk through each piece of evidence, to explain where she had found it, when, and what she believed it meant. Donna talked for 2 hours, her coffee growing cold in front of her, and Agent Chen took notes and asked questions that were sharp and specific, questions that made it clear she understood exactly what Donna was describing. At the end of the meeting, Agent Chen leaned forward and told Donna that the evidence was compelling, that it warranted a full investigation, but that Donna needed to understand what that meant. It meant months of work, possibly years. It meant that Donna would need to continue gathering evidence if she could do so safely. It meant that eventually her identity as the whistleblower would likely become public, and that there would be consequences she could not predict. Agent Chen asked Donna if she was certain she wanted to continue, and Donna thought about Marcus working at the grocery store, thought about all the other bright kids whose applications had been rejected to make room for mediocrity purchased with money, thought about Dr. Whitmore's hand on her shoulder and his voice telling her to know her place. She told Agent Chen she was certain. Over the next 6 weeks, Donna became a covert operative in her own workplace, and the fear that accompanied that role was unlike anything she had experienced before. Agent Chen had given her specific instructions about what to look for, had explained the difference between evidence that suggested wrongdoing and evidence that proved it. She had taught her how to photograph documents without being noticed and how to verify that her phone was not being monitored. Donna continued to work her shifts, continued to clean Dr. Whitmore's office twice a week, but now she was looking at everything with new eyes. She found more documents in the recycling bins, more careless emails left on desks, more financial records that showed money moving in patterns that had no legitimate explanation. She learned that Dr. Whitmore was not working alone, that there were at least 3 other administrators who were part of the scheme, including the Director of Financial Aid and a senior member of the Development Office. She learned that the fraud extended beyond simple admissions bribery into scholarship manipulation, where money designated for need-based aid was being redirected to students whose families had made donations. She learned that some of the scholarship funds were being siphoned into private accounts that Dr. Whitmore had been stealing not just from deserving students, but from the university itself. Every piece of evidence she found, she photographed and uploaded to a secure server that Agent Chen had set up for her. And every night when she came home, she checked to make sure Marcus was safe, terrified that somehow Dr. Whitmore would discover what she was doing and find a way to hurt her son. The investigation moved faster than Donna had expected. Agent Chen had explained that the FBI needed to build an airtight case before taking any public action, that they would need warrants and subpoenas and cooperation from financial institutions, and that none of that happened quickly. But the evidence Donna had provided, combined with the additional material she continued to gather, had given the FBI enough to begin approaching other potential witnesses, people who worked in the admissions office or in development who might have seen things that troubled them, but who had been too afraid to speak up alone. One of those people was Janet Liu, the administrative assistant whose kindness to Donna in the bathroom had been the first crack in Donna's isolation. Agent Chen contacted Janet through official channels, and Janet, terrified and tearful, agreed to cooperate. She provided access to email servers and internal databases that Donna could never have reached. And between the 2 women, the FBI built a picture of systematic corruption that had cost hundreds of deserving students their futures and had enriched Dr. Whitmore and his co-conspirators by more than $3 million over the past decade. In late May, Agent Chen told Donna that they had enough evidence to move forward with criminal charges and with search warrants for Dr. Whitmore's office, his home, and his bank accounts. She asked Donna if she was ready for what came next, and Donna said yes, even though she was not sure she was ready for anything. 2 days later, on a bright Tuesday morning, when students were taking their final exams and the campus was tense with the usual end-of-semester anxiety, federal agents arrived at Westmont University with warrants and badges and a determination that changed everything. The raid happened quickly and with a precision that suggested extensive planning. FBI agents arrived at 8 in the morning, before most of the administrative staff had settled into their desks, and they went directly to Dr. Whitmore's office with a search warrant that covered his physical space, his computers, and his university email account. They also executed simultaneous warrants at his home, at the homes of the two co-conspirators Agent Chen had identified, and at the offices of the suspicious education consulting firm that Donna had found in the recycling bin documents. Dr. Whitmore was in his office when the agents arrived, and according to Janet Liu, who witnessed the encounter from her desk just outside, his face went from confusion to shock to something like terror in the span of seconds. The agents were polite but firm, explaining that he was not under arrest, but that they were executing a search warrant as part of an ongoing investigation into fraud and corruption in the university's admissions and financial aid processes. They asked him to step away from his computer, to not touch his phone, and to wait in the hallway while they conducted their search. Dr. Whitmore tried to maintain his composure, tried to ask questions about who had made these accusations and on what basis, but the agents were not required to answer, and they did not. They spent 4 hours in his office, boxing up files, imaging his hard drives, photographing everything. Campus security was called to manage the growing crowd of students and faculty who gathered outside the administrative building, confused and gossiping, taking photos on their phones and posting updates on social media. By noon, local news crews had arrived, and by 3 that afternoon the story was the lead item on every regional news broadcast. The university's response was a masterclass in panic and damage control. The Board of Trustees held an emergency meeting that same afternoon, and by 5 they had released a statement expressing shock and concern, announcing that Dr. Whitmore had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. The university promised full cooperation with law enforcement. Dr. Patricia Henderson, the university president who had refused to meet with Donna weeks earlier, held a press conference where she spoke about institutional integrity and accountability, her voice shaking slightly, her eyes not quite meeting the cameras. She did not mention that she had ignored concerns raised by staff, did not acknowledge that the board had been content to look the other way as long as donations kept flowing. The statement mentioned that the investigation had been prompted by information from a whistleblower, but it did not name Donna, not yet. For 48 hours, Donna existed in a strange limbo, where she knew what she had done, but no one else did. She watched the chaos unfold from a distance, and wondered how long her anonymity would last. She went to work, cleaned the buildings that were now swarming with reporters and investigators, and said nothing. Marcus asked her if she thought Dr. Whitmore was really guilty, and she said she did not know, and hated herself for the lie. The media coverage was relentless and sensational, and attracted attention far beyond the local community. National news outlets picked up the story, drawing parallels to other college admissions scandals, speculating about how deep the corruption went and how many families had been involved. Reporters camped outside the homes of the wealthy parents whose names appeared in documents that the FBI had begun to leak strategically to build public pressure. Some of those parents hired lawyers and issued denials, claiming they had made legitimate donations and that their children had been admitted on merit. Others stayed silent, and that silence felt like an admission. Students at Westmont organized protests, demanding transparency and accountability, calling for the resignation of President Henderson and for a complete audit of every admission decision made in the past 10 years. The protest signs said things like, "Justice for stolen dreams," and "Meritocracy is a lie," and "Who boat my spot?" Student journalists from the campus newspaper began their own investigation, interviewing students who felt they had been unfairly rejected, examining demographic data that showed a troubling pattern of racial and economic discrimination. It was into this chaos that Dr. Whitmore began to search for a scapegoat, someone to blame, someone to deflect attention away from his own guilt. He could not imagine that Donna Carter, the cleaning woman who had emptied his trash for 22 years, could possibly be responsible for his downfall. So he settled on Janet Liu, the administrative assistant who had access to all the same systems and files, who had always seemed a little too concerned with rules and procedures. Dr. Whitmore's accusation against Janet was made through his lawyer in a statement to the press, and it was as cruel as it was inaccurate. The statement suggested that a disgruntled employee with access to confidential files had fabricated evidence and misrepresented routine administrative procedures as criminal activity, that the FBI had been missiled by someone with an axe to grind. The statement did not name Janet explicitly, but it described her role and department in enough detail that anyone who worked at Westmont would know exactly who he meant. Janet was devastated. She was confronted by reporters outside her apartment, questioned by colleagues who wondered if she was the whistleblower. She was subjected to hostile stares and whispered conversations that followed her through the hallways. She called Agent Chen in tears, saying she could not do this, that she was going to quit and move away, that she had tried to do the right thing, and it had destroyed her life. Agent Chen asked her to wait, to trust the process, to give the investigation time to reveal the truth. But Janet was drowning, and Donna, watching from a distance, felt a guilt that threatened to crush her. Janet was suffering because Donna had stayed silent about her own role, because the investigation had protected Donna's identity for as long as possible, because someone had to take the blame and Janet was the obvious target. Donna could not sleep, could barely eat, and after 3 days of watching Janet's public humiliation, she called Agent Chen and said she was ready to come forward, that she could not let Janet suffer for something Donna had done. The FBI had been planning to reveal Donna's identity anyway, but they had hoped to wait until closer to the indictment, when the case was strong enough that retaliation would be difficult. Donna's insistence on coming forward earlier than planned complicated things, but Agent Chen understood. They scheduled a public hearing with the Board of Trustees for the following week, a hearing that would address the investigation and allow the FBI to present its findings to the board and to the public. Agent Chen told Donna that this would be her moment to step forward, to claim her role as the whistleblower, to explain what she had seen and what she had done. She arranged for a lawyer from the American Civil Liberties Union to represent Donna, to ensure that her rights as a whistleblower were protected, to shield her from retaliation as much as the law allowed. The lawyer, a sharp woman in her 30s named Michelle Torres, met with Donna twice before the hearing to prepare her for the questions she would face, the hostility she might encounter, the ways that people would try to discredit her. Michelle told Donna that her credibility would be questioned because of her position, that people would assume she was not smart enough or educated enough to understand what she had witnessed, that she would need to be calm and precise and unwavering in her testimony. Donna listened to all of it and felt a terror that was different from anything she had experienced during the months of secret evidence gathering. This was public. This was permanent. This was the moment when her life would change irrevocably, and there would be no going back. The Board of Trustees hearing was held in the university's largest auditorium, and it was packed with students, faculty, staff, reporters, and members of the public who had followed the story and wanted to see what would happen next. The board sat at a long table on the stage, President Henderson at the center, looking pale and strained. Agent Chen sat at a smaller table with 2 other FBI representatives and a federal prosecutor who would eventually bring charges against Dr. Whitmore. Dr. Whitmore himself was not present, on the advice of his attorney, but his absence felt like a presence, a ghost haunting the proceedings. The hearing began with a statement from Agent Chen outlining the scope of the investigation, the nature of the allegations, and the strength of the evidence that had been gathered. She spoke for 20 minutes, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system, and she laid out a narrative of systematic corruption that was so detailed and so damning that the room fell into a stunned silence. Then she said the words that changed everything. She said that the investigation had been initiated based on a comprehensive report filed by a member of the university's custodial staff, a woman who had worked at Westmont for more than 2 decades, who had witnessed and documented criminal activity over a period of years, and who had come forward at great personal risk because she believed in justice. Agent Chen paused, and then she asked Donna Carter to stand and identify herself. Donna stood on legs that did not feel entirely solid, and the auditorium erupted. Students gasped, faculty members turned to look at her, reporters scrambled to get photos. Donna was wearing the same dress she had worn to Dr. Whitmore's office weeks earlier, the one that made her feel less invisible, and she stood with her hands clasped in front of her and looked directly at the board. President Henderson's mouth had fallen slightly open, an expression of shock that would later become a widely circulated photograph. For a long moment no one spoke, and then someone in the audience began to clap. The applause started slowly, and then built, spreading through the room until it was a wave of sound that made Donna's eyes sting with tears she refused to shed. Agent Chen gestured for Donna to come forward, and Donna walked down the aisle and up the steps to the stage, to the small table where Michelle Torres was waiting for her. She sat down, adjusted the microphone in front of her, and waited. The board president asked her to state her name and position for the record, and Donna spoke clearly, her voice steady even though her heart was racing. She said her name, said she was a custodial worker, said she had been employed at Westmont University for 22 years. Then she said she was ready to explain what she had witnessed and what she had done about it, and the room fell silent once more. Donna's testimony lasted nearly an hour, and it was the most surreal experience of her life, speaking into a microphone in front of hundreds of people, explaining how she had spent 22 years making herself invisible only to become undeniably visible in this single transformative moment. She described finding her first suspicious document in a recycling bin 7 years ago, described the gradual realization that what she was witnessing was not just carelessness but criminality, described the night she had recorded Dr. Whitmore's conversation about helping a student hide academic misconduct. She explained that she had kept silent for years because she was afraid, because she needed her job, because she had been promised that her son would be taken care of when the time came. She described the rejection letter Marcus had received, described going to Dr. Whitmore's office and being told to know her place, described the moment she decided that silence was no longer an option. Her voice remained steady throughout, and when she finished, the applause that had greeted her earlier returned, louder this time, mixed with shouts of support from students in the audience. Janet Liu, sitting in the 3rd row, was crying openly, and when Donna made eye contact with her, Janet mouthed the words "thank you" with such intensity that Donna felt something break loose in her chest. The board members looked stunned, President Henderson looked ill, and the reporters were typing frantically on their laptops. Agent Chen stood and added that Donna's evidence had been corroborated by financial records, email servers, and testimony from other witnesses, that the case against Dr. Whitmore was ironclad, and that federal charges would be filed within the week. The hearing ended shortly after, but the aftermath was only beginning. The media response to Donna's revelation was immediate and overwhelming, and it transformed her from an invisible worker into a national figure overnight. By the next morning, her photograph was on the front page of newspapers across the country, and the story of the janitor who had brought down a corrupt university administrator became a narrative that people could not resist. News crews camped outside her apartment, and Donna had to take a leave of absence from work, because she could not move through campus without being stopped by reporters asking for interviews. Some of the coverage was admiring, framing Donna as a hero, a symbol of courage and integrity, a working-class woman who had stood up to power and won. But some of it was skeptical, even hostile, questioning her motives, suggesting she had acted out of bitterness about her son's rejection rather than genuine concern for justice, implying that someone with her limited education could not possibly have understood the complexity of what she was reporting. Conservative commentators questioned whether she had violated her employer's trust by reporting internal matters to outside authorities, whether she had stolen documents that did not belong to her, whether the FBI had manipulated a vulnerable woman into becoming a pawn in an overreach of federal power. Donna did not read most of the coverage, but Marcus did, and he was furious at the way some outlets portrayed his mother as either a saint or a criminal with no acknowledgement that she was simply a person who had done what she believed was right. He wanted to defend her publicly, but Donna asked him not to, told him that the noise would die down eventually, that what mattered was the truth, not the commentary. Dr. Whitmore was indicted 3 weeks after the board hearing on 14 federal charges including mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, bribery, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and honest services fraud. The indictment detailed a scheme that had operated for more than a decade, involving at least 60 families who had paid a combined total of more than $3 million for admissions advantages that had been disguised as legitimate consulting fees and charitable donations. The two co-conspirators Donna had identified, the director of financial aid and a development officer, were also indicted, along with 4 wealthy parents who had paid the largest bribes. Dr. Whitmore pleaded not guilty and hired an expensive legal team that immediately began a public relations campaign to rehabilitate his image, portraying him as a dedicated educator who had been betrayed by a disgruntled employee with an agenda. But the evidence was too strong, the financial records too clear, the audio recording too damning. 6 months after the indictment, facing the reality of a trial he could not win, Dr. Whitmore changed his plea to guilty on 8 of the 14 counts in exchange for the dismissal of the remaining charges. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following spring, and the federal sentencing guidelines suggested a prison term of between 12 and 20 years. By pleading guilty, the judge, a black woman in her 60s who had herself been the first in her family to attend college, listened to both arguments and then delivered a sentence that aimed for both punishment and redemption. Dr. Whitmore was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with the possibility of early release after serving 85% of his sentence if he demonstrated good behavior and genuine rehabilitation. He was ordered to pay full restitution of all funds he had received through the scheme, totaling more than $1.8 million that had gone directly into his personal accounts, plus forfeit assets including his house, his car, and his retirement accounts. He was also sentenced to 5 years of supervised probation following his release, during which he would be required to perform 500 hours of community service, working with underprivileged youth in college access programs, a provision the judge described as educational justice. The judge's statement from the bench was widely quoted in the media coverage that followed. She said that Dr. Whitmore had weaponized his position to perpetuate inequality, that he had stolen futures from deserving students to enrich himself, and to maintain a system that privileged wealth over merit, that he had betrayed not just Westmont University, but the fundamental promise of American education. But she also said that the purpose of criminal justice was not merely to punish, but to transform, that even someone who had done terrible things could learn and change, and eventually contribute something positive to the world, and that she hoped Dr. Whitmore would use his time in prison to reflect on the harm he had caused and to develop genuine understanding of the systemic racism and classism that his actions had reinforced. Dr. Whitmore stood silently during the sentencing, his face pale, his expensive suit looking too large on his frame, and when the judge finished he was led away in handcuffs. His son Brandon Jr., who had lost his scholarship and been expelled from Westmont after evidence emerged of plagiarism and fabricated credentials, sat in the courtroom and did not look at his father as he was taken away. The parents who had participated in the bribery scheme faced their own consequences. though the outcomes varied based on their level of involvement and their willingness to cooperate with investigators. 4 parents who'd paid the largest bribes, ranging from $100,000 to $200,000, were charged with federal crimes and received sentences ranging from 6 months to 2 years in prison, along with substantial fines and community service requirements. A dozen other parents were offered deferred prosecution agreements in exchange for paying restitution, performing community service, and participating in educational programs about ethics and inequality. 3 parents fought the charges and went to trial, and all 3 were convicted and received harsher sentences than those who had pleaded guilty. The students, who had been admitted through the fraudulent scheme, faced difficult choices. Some withdrew from Westmont voluntarily, understanding that their presence was a constant reminder of injustice. Others fought to stay, arguing that they had not known about their parents' actions and should not be punished for crimes they did not commit. The university ultimately adopted a policy that allowed students to remain if they could demonstrate that they had not been aware of the fraud, and if they agreed to forfeit any scholarship money they had received, and to participate in a restorative justice program that included mentoring students from underrepresented backgrounds. It was an imperfect solution, but it acknowledged the complexity of holding children accountable for their parents' choices. The scholarship money that was recovered, both from Dr. Whitmore and from the parents, was placed into a fund specifically designated for students from low-income backgrounds and underrepresented communities. Students like Marcus, who had been denied opportunities they had earned. President Henderson resigned under pressure 3 months after the hearing, and the Board of Trustees conducted a national search for a new president who would be tasked with rebuilding the university's reputation and reforming its admissions and financial aid processes. They hired Dr. James Martinez, a first-generation college graduate who had spent his career advocating for educational equity, and he arrived on campus with a mandate for transformative change. One of his first actions was to commission an independent audit of every admission decision made during the 10 years of Dr. Whitmore's tenure, a massive undertaking that involved reviewing more than 15,000 applications. The audit revealed that at least 200 students who should have been admitted based on merit had been rejected to make room for students whose families had made financial contributions, and that students of color and students from low-income backgrounds had been disproportionately affected. President Martinez personally wrote letters to every one of those 200 students, apologizing for the injustice they had suffered and offering them the opportunity to enroll at Westmont with full scholarships covering tuition, room, board, and living expenses for however many years they needed to complete their degrees. Marcus Carter was one of the students who received such a letter, and when he opened it at the kitchen table of the apartment he shared with his mother, he cried for the first time since the rejection letter had arrived more than a year earlier. Donna sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder, and felt a vindication that was deeper than any courtroom verdict could provide. Her son was going to college. Her son was going to have the future she had fought for. And it was not charity, it was not pity, it was justice, late but finally arrived. Marcus enrolled at Westmont the following fall, and he thrived in ways that surprised even Donna, who had always believed in his potential. He joined the Pre-Law Law Society, made the Dean's List every semester, became a peer mentor for incoming first-generation students, and spent his summers working with the ACLU on educational equity cases. He was not the only student from the 200 who accepted President Martinez's offer, and together they formed a community within the larger university. Students who understood what it meant to have been denied and then reclaimed, who carried with them a fierce commitment to making sure no one else experienced what they had experienced. Donna continued to work at Westmont for one more year after Marcus enrolled, not because she needed to financially. The university had offered her a substantial settlement in recognition of the retaliation she might have faced, but because she wanted to finish what she had started. Then, at age 49, she did something she had dreamed about for 25 years. She enrolled as a full-time student at Westmont University, using the free tuition benefit that the university offered to all employees and their families, a benefit she had never been able to use before because she could not afford to stop working long enough to attend classes. She declared a double major in criminal justice and public policy, and she attacked her studies with the same meticulous attention to detail she had brought to her cleaning work and to her evidence gathering. Her professors were initially surprised to have a woman her age in their classes, surprised again by her thoughtful questions and her ability to connect theoretical concepts to real-world experience, and eventually not surprised at all, because Donna was simply an excellent student who happened to be older than her classmates. She graduated 4 years later, summa cum laude, at age 53, and Marcus was in the audience cheering louder than anyone when she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. The story of what Donna had done, and what it had cost her and what it had won, rippled outward from Westmont to other institutions, other communities, other people who had witnessed wrongdoing and stayed silent out of fear. Donna received letters from custodial workers at universities across the country, from cafeteria staff and groundskeepers and administrative assistants, people who saw things that troubled them but did not believe anyone would listen to them if they spoke up. She answered every letter, telling them that their voices mattered, that documentation was powerful, that there were laws to protect them, that change was possible. She was invited to speak at conferences about whistleblower protections, about educational equity, about the power dynamics that kept corruption hidden. She became an advocate, not because she had sought that role, but because it had found her and she could not turn away from it. She testified before state legislatures about the need for stronger protections for workers who reported institutional fraud, and she consulted with the Department of Education on reforms to college admissions oversight. Janet Liu, who had been vindicated when Donna came forward, left her position at Westmont and joined a nonprofit that supported educational whistleblowers, and she and Donna became close friends, bound by shared experience and shared purpose. The work was hard and often frustrating, progress was slow and resistance was fierce, but Donna had learned that justice was not a single moment, but a long campaign, and she was committed to fighting it. Have you ever witnessed injustice and felt powerless? Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. What Donna Carter proved, standing in that auditorium with her hands steady and her voice clear, was that no one is truly powerless, that visibility is a choice we make when we decide that silence is more dangerous than speaking, that the people society dismisses as invisible are often the ones who see most clearly. She proved that a cleaning woman with an old phone and a notebook full of evidence could bring down a system of corruption that had operated for a decade, that courage did not require credentials or connections, only conviction and careful documentation. She proved that the arc of the moral universe might bend toward justice, but sometimes it needs people willing to grab hold of it and pull. If stories like Donna's inspire you, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories of courage and justice. In the years that followed, Westmont University became a different institution, not perfect but better, with transparent admissions processes, robust oversight mechanisms, and a genuine commitment to diversity and equity that went beyond rhetoric. Donna Carter's name was on a scholarship fund, on a lecture series about ethics in education, and eventually on a plaque outside the building where she had worked for 22 years, a building that been renamed the Carter Center for Educational Justice. She did not particularly want her name on buildings, but she accepted it because Marcus told her it mattered, because it sent a message to every worker in every invisible position that their contributions were valuable, that their voices could change the world. Don't miss our next story about another underdog who stood up against the system. Click the video on your screen now. Comment 22 if you believe loyalty and courage deserve justice. 22 years she waited, let's honor that.